Reflection was mentioned. This is Herb Sutter counting the actual votes for getting reflection into the standard. It was 11:20 in the morning on Saturday of the Sophia meeting. And the one thing that was not mentioned about C++ is Herb Sutter is stepping down as convener of the entire standardization efforts. Next week is the vote for a new convener, so it will likely change focus and things we do because just people in charge tend to do that. And now, there we go. So yeah, so I've been doing standardization for 15 years, and so I've gotten a little reflexive to. Sorry, they're always bad fun. So first, since a lot of people have not heard, especially outside of the U.S., the National Lab. So there's 17. I keep counting and forgetting how many labs we have. Illinois' got 2. So these came out of the Manhattan Project, is where they all started way back when. So yeah, our guard was established in 1946, and we're funded by the U.S. Department of Energy, and we do material science and various others. We have our budget's probably going to go down very soon. This is from 2023, but almost 4,000 employees. I mean, we're fairly hefty. And we do AI for science. We have a new supercomputer called Aurora that we're putting a large language model on for science, training on peer-reviewed papers. We found during COVID-19 research for vaccines, AI actually helps in that circumstance. So. And the two things we're really famous for is like the Advanced Photon Source. They do a lot of material science research. We just upgraded that. And the part I'm a part of, the Argonne Leadership Computing Facility. I was not there on picture day, but it's just basically different national laboratories get different supercomputers as time goes on. And it's just so people can do research. Like anyone around the world can apply to do research, and if you're not commercial, you can get free time. And if you are commercial, you have to pay for roughly the energy cost. So who am I? I'm right there. It's very scary to be in the official Argonne slide decks. So I kind of have like the rest of my job and then WG21. So I'm a computer scientist at the Leadership Computing Facility. Basically, the Leadership Computing Facility is, we don't know what the new breakthroughs are going to be. It might be quantum computing, it may be storage. We want to be at the forefront of whatever those breakthroughs are. That's kind of our mission. I work really on 3 things. I work on C++, SYCL, which is a performance portability layer that is compiler provided, vendor provided, and Cocos, which is initially developed at Sandia Labs, Sandia National Laboratory. And it's another performance portability layer, but this one is pure C++ library. Roughly, since we don't know who's going to manufacture a given supercomputer, which chip vendor we're going to get, so for the scientist's point of view, they want not only portability, but they want to make sure performance is pretty good as we go to new supercomputers. So that's really our job. Aurora is the supercomputer. Somewhere I think I'm second fastest in the world. Those are marketing things. I don't pay that much attention to that. I'm on the Kronos SYCL committee, so I do standardization for that. And as part of that, I am the chair of the C++ compatibility subgroup. And as of last week, I'm also on WG14, which is the C committee. That's actually, I'd like to say I'm here just for you guys, but I can't quite get Argonne to fly me here for that. But they did send me to Brno for the C meeting. Now in WG21, which is the C++ committee, I am the vice chair of the US national body. I'm also the admin chair, so their monthly mailings, that's my responsibility. Technology, it's my responsibility to oversee it, but I don't actually edit. I don't get our Mattermost working or our paper system working, I just delegate. We have no actual budget. I'm also the Library Evolution Working Group Incubator co-chair. This is the study group that is trying to get proposals ready for the bigger group. We just make sure a proposal has the best chance of succeeding. Really? That was that. I think I copy and pasted. Oh well. 1 hour a day, it's all it takes. This is an easy language. It's weird because I keep voting in to make my percentage knowledge level go down. Like the standard is like probably double of what when I started in terms of actual text. So how did I get started in all this? Because it turns out I've done a few side jobs, but I've done C++ most of my professional life. And certainly that was not a plan when I started. So I'm at AT&T Bell Laboratories. It's 1988. I'm 1 year out of undergrad. And I'm a very shy person. So I have a friend at Apple, back when the logo was the 6-color logo. And he gives me a call and goes, "What do you know about C++? You guys invented it." That's enough. He knew me well enough. That was enough to get me like, well, I've got to go find out about this. And I was at the Indian Hill facility. That's where telephony happened, telephone switches, not where the computer science research happened. So I'm checking around, and there's like one guy with a tape. So if I want it, I have to go to his office and like convince him to like read the tape in somewhere. And it was C-Front 1.0. And I learned how the object model worked because you could see the C code being produced. I also learned a lot about C because you could see the C code being produced. Like lots of indented curlies and new variables being done because you can't just declare a variable in the middle. So I drove over to a building, another Bell Labs building, and I knock on this guy's door. And it turns out it's Jim Cope. The thing he's very famous for is the curiously recurring template pattern. And he's very enthusiastic, like he's very excited that I'm going to do this. He's written those books. And then I had a question he couldn't answer. Like it didn't make any sense to me. Right, so you have, so you declare your int in there, and then after the curly break is usually, these days, it's out of scope. You can't refer to it. At the time, you could refer to it, which means that was valid. And it made no sense to me. Why would the scope go past it? So I need to ask somebody in the computer science department. I spent 2 days agonizing over an email, because I do not know Bjarne at this point. I've never met him. And so I very carefully write him an email. And I got a very nice, detailed response back. Roughly, he had users, he couldn't break users. That was, the standards committee still fixed it anyway. I did finally meet him on my very last day at Bell Labs. I was going to be moving to California. And what he said at that time, he gave a talk, and so at the time, I worked on the 5ESS telephone switch. This was one of the largest software projects of all time at that point. It was roughly 50 million lines of C code. We think about 10 million were dead, but we weren't sure. And just by putting function prototypes in, we've fixed 3 bugs. And so when I was at Bell Labs, we also had C standardization, because that was the time that Bell Labs was giving C to a standards committee. And there was no guarantee it would succeed, because there were lots of compromises that had to be made. For instance, the reason there's 3 care types, right? There's unsigned care, signed care, and care, is because some vendors had their clients as assigned care for care, and some had unsigned. And if the committee would have picked one, the other would have said, "We're done with you guys, goodbye." So it was, at the time, a very risky process. And so because I was at Bell Labs, I could get copies for free. And because I had no idea as a little junior engineer how else to get this stuff. Because I don't have signature authority. I can't buy things, not that I knew of. But so I would follow along with it, and then I went on Usenet. I wasn't really that smart. This is the earliest message I can find, but I know it's not the earliest message I ever did, because I had different machines at Indian Hill where I worked before that. So somebody said like, hey, let's, you shouldn't do if standard. If you change it, it can break somebody, which is of course true. It's like, I don't know. I thought I was smart. So fast forward to 2007, and my friend Marshall Cloud gives me a call and says, hey, we're putting on a conference for Boost. You should come. And I go like, yeah, I should come. And I meet Beeman, the late Beeman Dawes, the founder of Boost. And he asks, where am I from? And like I tell him, and he tells me some weird street names by where I live. And I go like, how do you know this? You live in Virginia, I live in Illinois. And it's because he did mapping software, so he knew all that stuff. And then he says, there's enough, he says, oh, you live in Illinois. We're having a standards meeting there in 3 years. I could have said, wait, I have a job. I can fly somewhere. But I was scared, right? It's imposter syndrome, right? I'm going to go, like, book authors are there. Bjarne's going to be there. Like, I don't fit into this crowd. I don't know. I'm not that smart. So it really did take me 3 years to get up the nerve to go. And I've been doing it ever since. And to be fair, like Beeman recruited a lot of people in his day who are still on the committee to this day. He was a good guy. Now, what do you get? I get to travel, right? I get to go to Varna. Like, look at this. Hawaii. Tokyo. Come on, this is great. Well, Varna. Hawaii. Although, at least by this time, we could see the outside. There was the original hotel we had in Kona. Like, there were no windows. You could hear the ocean through the walls. You were 50 feet away. It was very frustrating. Yeah. Tokyo. I mean, we had an earthquake. That was about the only really exciting thing. But you're either in, a university or you're in office space somewhere or a hotel conference rooms. Woo. Vienna hosts a meeting. I want to come back. I like Vienna. So my first meeting was at Fermilab, the other national lab, and I have not joined the national lab yet, in 2010. Roughly, I interviewed and said I wanted to go, and they said, we'll probably send you. I did not speak, like, in session at all. I did not know that I could, like, vote in straw polls. No one told me. And I was just scared. Like, and Bjarne was there. Herb was, I think he was sick, so it was a room like this, and you could just hear him over the speakers, except the speakers were, like, 20 years old. They weren't that good. The voice of God, right? And I had a friend, Matt Ostrin, who I knew through other means besides C++. So I would just send him an email, and he would say, no, you should speak up. It's like, no, I don't have the nerve. And there were really only 3 groups going on at a time. It was a fairly small committee. We had core for doing language and wording, library for doing new libraries and wording for libraries, and concurrency, because that was still important even back then. And so part of this, we were finalizing how move constructors, how the whole, which get defaulted, what the behavior is. And weirdly, Bjarne was pushing for bitwise. And I'm going like, okay, this doesn't work semantically. And I'm thinking like, so why is he doing that? It's Bjarne. He's not, he's not a dumb person. It's like, he's trying to be strategic. He figures if everyone hates this one, they'll pick something else. And I'll get it this way. Don't try to be strategic on this committee. It almost always backfires. So I just started a job at a trading firm. And so I come back from the meeting, and like I go, we should join. They go, how much? Tell me the amount. Yeah, sure. This is the first time I had a job where like the amounts in like thousands of dollars were just, yeah, sure, go for it. So the next meeting's in Madrid. And I want to go. I look at my travel policy, and it's like, oh, business class for anything overseas. It's like a $5,000 to $6,000 US dollar ticket. Like, those are pricey. So I go to my manager, and I go, I'm selling myself, right, because I want to go. And that's what he said. Like, we're coming back on international travel, but you should be there. That was the entirety of that conversation. And so what I've learned, just starting there, everyone on the committee wants to make C++ better. I mean, You kind of wish big governments worked this way, but no one's trying to sabotage the language. We just want to make something better, even if no two of us can agree on what that is. And you only have so much energy. You can't fight every single battle, even when it was only 3 rooms. Like now, I forget how many study groups we counted. You can't even be everywhere. Just figure out what you're passionate about and really care about. So, Madrid, still like a relatively small committee. And there was a big debate about narrow contracts and wide contracts. And John Lakos from Bloomberg is going around before the big plenary session to discuss this and trying to convince us that he's right, to each person, because the committee's still that small. And what a wide contract, the problems are, when no except first got proposed, there were no semantics, and then safety and security people decided they wanted semantics. So it forces termination if you try to throw it through a no except clause. And that turns out to be problematic, but nobody knew at the time. So in the Bloomberg, in the John Lakos, Alistair Meredith language, a wide contract is something that does not have any preconditions. And so John Lakos is going around saying no library instructor should throw, and any library function with a wide contract that doesn't throw should be marked no except. Because we were kind of flailing. We were just randomly marking functions no except. And we're trying to ship the standard like at the end of that week. And if you want to do conditional no except, the only ones you should do are swap and move, because that's really the only ones that matter. And C-compatible library functions, I'm not sure how much we cared at that point, because we were just trying to get the standard out. We knew they couldn't throw. I was convinced. Until plenary. In the middle of the heated debate, I realized, in my opinion, that John was wrong. So if you violate a precondition, the way the standard is written, the moment you hit undefined behavior, the standard no longer applies. That's what the real definition of undefined behavior. The standard does not apply anymore. And you can throw through a no except clause. Why not? You can do whatever you want. Nobody was speaking up. So the first time I was willing to speak in the committee, since I at least had to get my point out there, I raised my hand very slowly. I made my point, and I was shot down by the person behind me saying, no except trumps undefined behavior, from a compiler implementer, by the way. I slithered back down. I still believe I was right in the theoretical world of the standard, even not in the practical world. And I also believe we got contracts this year to C++26. I believe, unlike the previous logic, this is actually sound because the undefined behavior doesn't happen until the end of the handler. And I think that fixes the problem that I was having in my mind. So we had a fragile, it's Thursday in Madrid. We had a fragile consensus. Herb kind of decides to take the poll, like, well, are we done? Do we want to ship C++11? It was kind of anticlimactic. I didn't quite know that's what we were voting for, but we did. Rejoice, and then, hey, should we take tomorrow off? And like France said no. Everyone else said yes. Like, within 13 years, we need a break. You know, it's kind of fair. So while I'm in Madrid, I hear John Lakos offered to help sponsor the next Kona meeting in 2012. My company never told me no to anything. It's like, I might as well ask, right? That took a week and a half to get an answer. The only question I've ever asked them that took that long, because it went to the partners. They said yes, and we sponsored a C meeting. So I have been to WG14 meetings before. But really, even though I was very shy at that point still, and especially in that intimidating room, you need to speak up. If you don't, who will? And a lot of times, I can't remember any specific examples, but I know this has happened. The mere fact somebody asks a question gets the entire room to change its view on a feature because, oh, we didn't consider that. This doesn't work, or we need to go figure this out. And it's happened a lot. It happens a lot, so it's very important. It's hard, right? It's a room full of very smart but you got to do it. So here's Lake Kona. I think that's the room with no windows, if I remember right. Oh, we were all so young. And so evolution for the language stuff opens back up. And someone from Microsoft, named Herb Sutter, thought range-based 4 was broken. Because Microsoft had not implemented ADL in their compiler. So in their compiler, it was broken. And we had to explain. But no, if you think about it, he doesn't see anything else, right? And he goes, oh, then he gets it, right? And the other thing we did at that meeting is we agreed that we were going to ship a standard every 6 years. Because we didn't like the previous way of doing it, which 98 was the first standard, and then 03 was the bug fix. And then we kept putting it off until we got to 2011. So we wanted to go to a train model, how often we should do it. Now, since we were going to sponsor the C++ meeting, the C meeting in Chicago, I felt I should sacrifice and stay in Hawaii and meet the C committee. So this is the first time I actually attended a WG14, was in Kona. Pretty small compared to, even compared to C++ at that time. It's not that much bigger now. But yeah, so what I learned is members of the committee are very smart, but they do have gaps. I mean, at one point, Nevin Liber, one of the authors of the template book, primary author of the template book, like, I corrected him once. Like, he's corrected me 1,000 times, and I'm okay with that ratio. Like, this was, why would people use mutable? And he used it for caching, and it's like, no, I use it for things like mutexes. And his code, because he writes on compilers, they just don't do that. So he never sees that kind of thing. So we all have gaps. It's how we see the world. So I'm not just going to do a chronological one. I'll just kind of go through like battle. So I am not a core language expert. I'm a library. So there was this issue. This is the first time I argued against the core language folks on the mailing list. So integer bit fields have their signed implementation defined because that's what C does. So if you have a bit field and you declare it int, you don't know if it's signed or unsigned. If you declare it signed space int, that gives you a signed bit field. And it turns out, like in C++ 11, we had decal type. So we have another way to spell things. And these things can go through type defs. And it makes no sense to me. I'm not a type theory guy, but the bare minimum of what a type means is that it doesn't matter how you spell it. If it's the same type, it has to have the same behavior. And it just doesn't here. And so there's at least 168 emails on this. And at one point they say, okay, we all agree that we're just going to leave this alone. And I go, I don't agree. This is still like, this is not sound. We can't do this. Everyone came around to my point of view. So I felt good, finally. I was contributing. I'm going to fast forward to last week. C brought this thing up again. Okay, now it's, type up instead of decal type. They're haven't gotten anywhere yet. I'm going to work on convincing the entire C committee. And someone brought up a new thing. What about system type apps like int32? Right? If you declare a bit field like that, you have no idea how the system implementer spelled it. In all likelihood, they spelled it int because it's shorter. I mean, that's what most of us do. So yeah, I mean, that's how I know there's 168 emails, because I had to look last week and find my emails. So optional was something I was very passionate about. Someone proposed adding an optional T type, and I thought, this is great. And we argued literally over every single line, every single part of the interface. And someone, Eric Niebler, said, optional tref assignment is weird. So the author said, okay, we'll pull it now. We can put it back later, because we want to get consensus. So they want to get something shipped. And we're in Bristol, and we have a big debate out of this. And every single session, we relitigated everything from the beginning. It was frustrating. because not everybody agrees on decisions. We got the same outcome every single time because people really aren't changing. There's no new information. People aren't changing their minds. We had an evening session that went from 7:30 till I think 1:15 in the morning, without a break, trying to do relation operators, less than and greater than. How to that word? We couldn't do it, and we had this in the working. We had this in the working draft for C++ 14. We ended up removing it because of these comparison operators. It went into what's called a technical specification, Library Fundamentals TS, where it languished for 3 years. We got no feedback. So 17 comes along, we bring it back into the standard, and finally, after many false starts, optional TREF is one of the last things we approved for 26. So we finally got there. So why don't TSs work is because we get implementation experience, but users don't tend to pick it up because it's a dead end. Why would you base your production code on something that's going to be a dead end? You may play a little bit, but you're not going to use it enough to get us enough feedback. And worse, for a while, we kind of have subpar wording because we go, oh, it's just a TS, we'll fix the wording when we put it in the standard. Years goes by, oh, the wording must have been good, it was in a TS, let's just put it in the standard. And it needs concrete questions to be answered, and they just don't get answered. There is a new process, white papers, that's less overhead. You just publish it once. You don't need a bunch of, as much approval, I think. We have proposed white paper on transactional memory coming out, and one on profiles, which is Bjarne's stuff for dealing with undefined behavior. Variant, so after this whole experience with optional, I was exhausted. And Axel Neumann comes with a variant proposal. Right? It's one of those sum types, right? It's like a union. It's a discriminated union, right? You can have exactly one of n types. He asked me to be a co-author because I knew all the issues, and it's like, no, because if I'm the co-author and I'm mad at the committee, I can't just leave during my paper. Like, they're just going to stop reviewing my paper. So I'll do as much work as you want behind the scenes. It's not the work doesn't scare me. It's at the time the committee scared me more than the work, and keep myself sane. And I tried hundreds of email messages. Right, here's the fundamental problem with variant. If it holds something of type A and you want it to hold something of type B, you can't double buffer, or that's double buffering one solution, but you destroy A, and then when you try to create B, it throws, which means what state do you leave it in? And this is fundamental, and huge debates. And like there was a group of like less than a dozen of us thought it through how it should work, and everybody told us we were too small. Apparently, not enough cooks in the design by committee. We don't usually do design by committee. Head of a national body said, don't even think about putting this into the standard before TS. That person voted for putting it in the standard. So. And Axel, my friend Axel, we're at dinner in Switzerland, and some new person wanted to make a change to variant, and Axel goes, you should write a paper. Does that mean you support it? Oh, I hate the idea, but the committee should debate it. And to me, this is the ideal on how things should work. If there are issues or new ideas, we should debate them. So he's one of the people who's shaped how I approach committee work and other work. So then there was this thing called string view, which started from Google, from string-ref, and we got to standardize. And then some of the Google folks wanted, if you just pass a null pointer value into the constructor, that's the same as an empty string view. Now, to me, that's wrong because I've done some database stuff, and there's a difference between an empty string and an entry that's not there. Those are distinct concepts, and we shouldn't conflate them. So and I lost the initial battle for this just in Library Evolution. And I was kind of grumbling to people would break, drinking food, and people going, no, you're right. We should debate this more. And we eventually decided to have, in Rapperswil, what was nicknamed the Thunderdome session. It was going to be me against my friend Jorg. So I've known Jorg for, I don't know, since the 90s, many years. I see on Facebook, like, I missed my flight, I got to Paris, I'm going to drive to Switzerland. He's had issues with the law driving in the US, and I didn't see him in Switzerland at the plenary session, so I had no idea. So the only person he knows really well besides me is Marshall Clow. And he asked Marshall, where's Nevin? And Marshall goes, in the Thunderdome. Not saying what it was. So he literally went all the way to Switzerland and then didn't get to debate me. Titus actually had to do it. Another one, this was probably the hardest one I had to debate. So I believe size types should be unsigned. There are some optimization reasons and some checking reasons you may want to make it signed. And we had just forgotten to debate it. I mean, look through the notes, it said, we should debate this, but no one actually had debated this. And by this time, I wasn't even paying attention to this span. A friend of mine was between jobs, and he's like, hey, Nevin, you need to object to this. It's like, well, what do you mean? And then, like, I asked her, like, do I have to object? It's like, it's easier if you object, because my friend was technically not working anywhere, so not a member of the committee for, like, a couple weeks. So I have to go up against Bjarne and Herb. This is terrifying. I mean, to this day, Bjarne is still mad at me. And I didn't realize that the paper we had brought, because it turned out that meeting, I ended up presenting 3 different papers, none of which I wrote. Every time I started a paper, someone else had written it. Like I did make unique default in it. I'd gotten the title typed into Microsoft Word, and someone on an email said, hey, I just wrote this paper. And I go like, that's what I was writing. Are you going to be in the committee? No. Okay, I'll debate it for you. That's fine. But yeah, I ended up having to litigate this twice because I didn't know we had the wording. So the very next meeting, it's me against Bjarne and Herb again. But of course, nothing changes because there's no new information. And we as a committee are getting better at making sure we don't redebate things without new information. So as part of this, like, when it was briefly signed, it was spelled index type. So like, okay, I need to get this fixed. I wrote a quick NB comment in a paper to fix this. Sailed through library evolution in 10 minutes. I mean, the only question was, do we keep index type and add size type, or just change it to size type? I don't remember if it was unanimous or not, but size type was it. I'm having another debate with somebody over email, and the very first objection in the plenary session in Prague is my paper. Another person from Argonne was also on the committee, so he was, and at that time we were voting 1 per company, so I was like, you need to vote for me. Like, so it was just, I was kind of blindsided here, and it turned out the person didn't like the change from making size type unsigned. He was objecting to everything. And everyone else later on said, you shouldn't do that. This paper fixes something we need fixed. I have blindsided people myself. I've been on both sides of that, and I've learned not to do that. Something that I'm gotten to the standard finally, yay. So in-place vector. So way back when, I have to look when, but I figured out we wanted to put unmovable types into vector. I was working on trading stuff, and we wanted the performance of having it compact and with cache lines, et cetera. And so the committee rejected my proposal, but as part of that, I go, hey, I want small vector. They said, sure. And then we go, well, what about static vector? Because it's kind of the same. Small vector has an allocator, and will, if you have more than the capacity, it will just allocate space. Static vector is the opposite of it. It doesn't have that. So Godbolt and I came up with the name clump. He did, actually. We spent 2 days trying to find I'm trying to game the system now. 2 days trying to find the worst possible name for small vector so I can get small vector as the name. That's what I was trying to be strategic. So Gonzalo, 2 years go by, and I'm changing jobs, and there were parts somebody else wanted to do for the small vector proposal. So it was on the back burner. And I kept getting requests for feedback from Gonzalo, and I was giving him tons of feedback because I thought through most of the issues. At some point, he goes, "Hey, Nevin, do you want to be an author too?" I find out later why he did that. He didn't want me voting against it. But that's fine. And David Sankel, he got us all together, and we, over Zoom, figured out what we could agree to and what we weren't going to agree to. I think it was over Zoom, maybe email. And we decided where we didn't have consensus, we would let Library Evolution decide, and we would live with those decisions. Because we all wanted in-place vector, and everything else was minor. And to me, this is how the process should work. You get everybody together who's a stakeholder, even people against things, and just come to conclusion and ship it. So get to Varna. Monday, we had no wording. So like, no, we're not going to do it this week. We'll get it later at some point. I think we had a dinner on Wednesday. After dinner, we decided we could pull this off. So I talked to Daniel Krugler, who's a really good library person, really good at wording, and convinced him, I asked him, if he was willing to spend his lunch doing it. He said, yeah, let's do it. We were the very last thing approved in Varna in Library Evolution. Since then, some people didn't like some of the decisions, and they tried to relitigate it, and the 4 authors on the paper, we keep saying, we don't want to relitigate it. Here's my position, but I would rather we just don't relitigate it. We fought this once. This is the type that will never be not modified. There is people try to get an allocator support for it, even though it doesn't allocate things. There's people wanting to change the interface, and they're going to use a national body comment to do that. So I have to go write kind of the opposite one, which is weird, because you can't argue for the status quo. But I'm hoping, so I have not worked on small vector, only because I want to make sure in-place vector finally ships before I do something that's similar, and people go, wait a minute, we got to get these together or whatever. So I plan on doing more work on small vector as soon as this in-place vector finally ships. Yeah, so maybe if you want an allocator template parameter, they litigated it in Tokyo. They tried to relitigate it in Hagenberg, but there was no new information. And also, one of the jokes I tend to make, they've gotten a little better sometimes, is that Library Evolution will never pick a short name when a long one will do. They love long names. It's I think, 26 letters is one of the longest function names we have. And so something comparison 3-way is in there. I hate bug shedding, which is our naming discussions. Let's make up things right now, we'll put them against the wall, and naming should be part of design. And you should think about it for a while, because that's the thing that's front most facing is what's the name. So I was looking through things. I have lots of R's, and I like fun titles. A lot of committee members don't. I can Google that. When I forget what it is, I can Google, respect vector reserve request relative to reallocation. Basically, what I noticed is that whenever people called reserve on a vector, you reserve 10 elements, and it has to do an allocation, you would get 10 elements. And I had some background doing embedded stuff, it's important not to waste memory. So made it all the way up to plenary in Finland, and got rejected. One person said his vector didn't work that way. They since realized they were wrong. One person wanted to overcommit memory for efficiency. Well, 2 people wanted to. One wanted to do it with reserve. That proposal has never shown up. That was from Google. And got a change in our policy to be delay versus bird in the hand, which means if someone says, well, we should do it this way, it's unless there's an actual proposal on the table or a commitment to one at the very next meeting, that's not considered information that we consider. Because otherwise you can stall indefinitely. So my first successful proposal, I wanted to use, there was talk about we should be able to use standard function as the deleter. In order to do that, it has to have no except move operations. So this is it. This is all I'm trying to do is add no except it. And they figured, it can work, no problem. About to go to plenary, I get an email from Pablo saying, yeah, PMR allocators, you can't quite do that. Have to scratch that one out in the next meeting. So my first proposal added like one no except to the standard and deleted some text. My first really successful language proposal is static operator square bracket, and we had, not that particular one, but we added variadic operator square bracket, and we added static function call operator, but we never like combined the two. Like if you have a static square bracket, variadic, we don't have that, and that fell through the cracks, and I realized it like about 5 minutes after the meeting had ended. It's like, oh. So it wasn't pressing, so I'll write an NB comment about it. Sorry, I wasn't going to write an NB comment. I was just going to propose it in the next, for 26. This was 23. Just have dinner with Michael Wong a few months later. He goes, tell him about this. It's like, no, we should do this now. It's like, okay. He's had a delegation for Canada. That's like, so a US national body comment, a Canadian national body comment. Gasper comes visiting, same thing. Like, yeah, we should do this. I'll read, the UK national body comment. It's like, if I got that many, national bodies, sure. So let's say we almost never add features, and if you squint to this, it's a bug fix, but it's definitely not something, at least the papers said we should go do this, even though nobody actually wrote that paper. And part of standardization is you don't get your way most of the time. It can be frustrating. So explicitly implicifying explicit constructors. This was because we were at a library-only meeting, and I didn't want to scribe. And they're going, okay, Nevin, if you write this paper, you don't have to scribe. Okay. I find it hard to scribe is take notes, right? And I find it hard to scribe because then I can't really concentrate on my thoughts on the subject. Well, if I'm writing a paper at the same time, if it's something I really care about, I can hold off writing the paper for a while. Contiguous containers should contain data. .data isn't a requirement of contiguous containers, and I think it should be. At that point, they said, you should write concepts for this. And then like the chairs got together and said, oh, we didn't want to go in that direction. Nevin, come back. Let's talk about this one more time. Because I wasn't going to do that one. That was an insane amount of work to get one little thing changed in the requirements. And then we added make unique default init, and we were supposed to have, that was one of the papers that I hadn't written that someone else had. And we were supposed to debate the name, and we never did. And for that, I didn't get the name I wanted, but in retrospect, it became make unique for overwrite, and I think that is the right name. I have had successful proposals. I'm part of MD Span, which was considered one of the flagships for 23. Linear algebra is in 26. Requires span, and this is minor, and makes the stream view to be trivially copyable. So I work on GPUs. In order to transfer things from a CPU to a GPU, you have to memcopy it. So this is why trivially copyable is important. No one, until I started working at Argonne, explained to me why trivially copyable is important. So people would ask, should this be trivially copyable? And I would go, sure, it doesn't hurt me, go for it. So part of what I do on the committee is I explain to people why this stuff is important to us. So we had library fundamental CSs. We're not going to do those anymore. We did a final one. It was sort of going to be the final one, except there's wording in it that says, if we, here's how you do it. Every couple of years, we're going to ship a new one. I said, well, let's not say that. And they go, that's non-normative. It's like, then take it out. I mean, as a committee, we lie to ourselves a little bit. And I don't want that, so. Another thing, we're finding contiguous iterators, so you can convert them back to pointers, because it's extremely useful to be able to do that. And then came chairing, right? I'm going along till about Prague. See, this works. Yay! So this was the peak of the committee in Prague, like 250 people. And there I am with my top hat. That was hard to get over to Prague. Talk about their doing pizza. So after the meeting, I accepted the position of library incubator co-chair. Because it's a little prep work before the meeting, a little write-ups afterwards. How much could it be? Yeah, this was weeks before the world shut down. So since I'm me and my co-chair, Billy Baker, like, our philosophy is the whole purpose of the incubators, it's not a stalling tactic, it's we want to get papers ready for bigger groups, because otherwise a lot of the same kind of easy questions come up. And our job on the incubator is to say, your paper needs to discuss this question. We don't have an answer. If you can ask us for an answer if you want, but it's more, if you don't bring it up, they're going to bring it up in the room, and you're going to have to bring back another paper after that. And it's also, I have to protect the time of Library Evolution incubator people. One of the downsides to Library Evolution is that they almost always run late. And they almost always, like for telecons, they'll say, here's 3 papers, and I'll get to 1. And to me, that encourages people not to read the papers and not to prepare. And it's more important to prepare than it is saying our time is valuable. Let's make that ratio work. We have never ended a session late. We've come close. I mean, we hit 4 seconds before we say adjourn. And this is a great place, for new participants to figure out what's going on, because it's a pretty friendly room, and we as chairs want to keep it that way. So, one thing about chairing, never make promises you cannot keep, especially promises about committee time. I have seen close to fistfights over people who were promised committee time and didn't get it. And I've told every single chair of Library Evolution this, and they've all ignored me at some point. And they get in big trouble for it. There are things that I'm glad we have a code of conduct now, because they would have violated the code of conduct. People they think they're promised, and they think they get mad when they don't have it. And sort of on the opposite side, we were doing in-place vector. David Sanko was going to the person who was chairing the Library Evolution sessions for that and saying, hey, can you give us time on Friday at Varna? And he's going I will try, but there's no guarantees, right? Which is the answer you have to give. And David's trying to push, and I'm trying to tell David, no, this is the best answer you're going to get. If you push him enough, he's just going to say no. So the other thing that I didn't realize it, is that it's a people management job. It's not, you have to be technically sharp, but you're trying to manage people. And I'm not a manager, I'm an individual developer. So the whole, in the US, the talk less, listen more from Hamilton. It's important. You have to let people vent when the decision doesn't go their way. And you also have to let people present their opinion, and you have to, a lot of times, decide, do you want to get your feature in, or do you want to be right? Because if you argue with some people trying to be right, they're not going to vote for you. You just get them mad. You're being confrontational. So a lot of times it's just be quiet and listen, and it gets things through. If you have real technical points, you can't get past. Of course, you mention them. And we're facilitators. Our job is really just to make the process go better. So did I start doing this? It's because I do believe you should give back to the communities you are a part of. And part of why I do things in here is when Bjarne and Herb came to my meetup, well, I wasn't my meetup anymore, but the Chicago C++ meetup, they put $5 in each. So we're giving back in every way we can, right? I also fully believe every release of C++ has made the language better. Before 11, I was seriously thinking maybe I should just move over to Java. I'm not seeing where it's going, and it's not fun anymore. And 11 made things fun again. And we have new things. Reflection is a huge thing that's going to be great. So even knowing, as the slogan goes, knowing how the sausage is made, it's still a better language. So I know this was asked before, do come to a meeting. I'm not saying you have to keep doing standardization, but learn how it's done. I mean, I got such an appreciation for the people and the process by doing it. It's not perfect, we can certainly get better at it, and we do. And if, the imposter syndrome thing, right, being here alone makes you more qualified than most people at C++, because you have passion about it, you want to learn about it. I started going because I had nowhere else to go to learn about C++. I went to BoostCon to learn cutting-edge library techniques, but for language, I mean, I'd been to a couple of Scott Meyer's Sutter seminars. I ran out of places. The committee or nothing was all I had left. It's hard, but try not to be intimidated if you go to the meetings. You have a right to speak, and you should speak because you have a different viewpoint that even a lot of really smart people in a room may never have seen. And you may trigger something in them to change. And it just happens so often. If you want to present a proposal, now a lot of times if you want to go to a meeting, your employer goes, why should I send you? You can go, I have a proposal to make. And we as chairs realize that's how some people get to their first meeting. And we will do our best to make sure you get time to speak to the committee. But it is like, presenting a PhD dissertation in front of a room full of people who don't care if you graduate. It can be scary, right? You have to remember, though, you're not the one being judged. It's your ideas that are being judged. And for me, started out as a shy kid, that's hard. I know it's true, in my mind, but I don't know it's true in my heart. And even, it's still mostly trade-offs. I see the world differently than other people based on my experiences. Sometimes they show, the national labs, they go, you're just trying to bias the vote. It's we're not trying to bias the vote. We did not go ahead of time saying, here's how we're going to vote. We see the same problem, so we're going to vote roughly the same way most of the time. But if you watch people in the room, that's not 100% true. I've voted against, the person who started Cocos, And the chairs make sure people have to listen to you there. They don't have to agree with you. I mean, no one likes to hear no. And for me, it's when I make a proposal, I know which things I'm willing to compromise on and which things I'm not. And if it's one of the things I'm not, then I would say, well, I'm not going to do this one anymore. Not to be malicious or not to threaten the committee. It's more, it doesn't meet my needs, so someone else can do this. I need to get this on a shirt. This happens all the time. So people go, we should reject more papers. Not my papers, obviously, but we should reject more papers. That doesn't scale. Committee does this all the time. And the whole reason the committee works is because if I want to present something, I get a little bit of a room full of people to evaluate what I'm proposing, and I give them a lot of time in return. But the one thing, and people have to remember this, the thing more valuable than committee time, because Herb Sutter has gone off before and said it's $1.5 million a day, or I don't know what numbers he uses for committee time. But your own time is more valuable than that. People will try to get you to do things. You got to keep your sanity. So my friend Rob Douglas put this really well. I'm riding on the coattails of geniuses. And I learned something from these people every single meeting. And not just about C++. I've gotten better argument techniques out of it. I've given talks, I learned how to do that. First time I ever gave a talk, I was terrible. I've recovered from that. Hopefully this isn't terrible. And really, I'm hopefully making a positive difference in the lives of millions of developers. If we think about it hard, it's pretty scary how much power and authority we have. But really, I keep going on because I like the people who do it. I've made friends, some of which are in this room. Right? I mean, this is our Chicago meeting. We had lunch on the terrace. It was great. This was Hagenberg. And this was after a very stressful Wednesday or Thursday we had. But ultimately, it's the people. Yay. And that's me reflecting on 15 years of doing C++. Without fear. I love going to bookstores and seeing titles like this. I don't know if the books are that good, but the titles are great. So thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Now you've got the time to ask questions. Just wait for the mic.
Okay, I have a question about the context per type specifier. So, if I remember correctly, it was introduced in 11th standard.
Yes.
But was expanded much larger.
It's been expanded every single. I think 14 got variables. I can't remember. 17 had something. Cause I used to have a slide that said what, like, you know, what standard do these 3 lines like cover?
Yeah. So the question is, like,
the history.
Yeah, it's like in 17th standard there is the if constructor. In 20s there is also const-eval. In 23, I guess, like a lot of standard containers was added context per type specifier to their APIs. But originally, what was the
originally
motivation?
there was So good question. Originally there was a lot of fear that C++ compile times would get even slower because you could, if you allow arbitrary function computations, you're just moving the computation to compile time. And it turns out it's so useful that people don't actually care about that. So one of the problems we have is vendors are not allowed to put context per on standard library functions unless it's specified that way in the standard. No except, which is the same kind of issue, they are allowed to add no except if they feel like it. So the problem is if vendors can't do it, they can't try out to see it because of portability. That's why we've debated it, I think, twice in the standard committee. So they don't want to allow vendors leeway because it would break compatibility, and I think that's wrong. That makes, Hana Jizikova, her reputation, among other reputations, is she wants to context per everything that she can. I mean, she has some brilliant, I think she gave a keynote on it. Yeah, at Code Dive last year. It's brilliant. Like, her talks are always brilliant. We may, if we have everything context per, do we still need a keyword? Right? Because sometimes people say, C++ has the wrong defaults, right? So we're marking all these things as context per. Well, if everything's context per, why do you have to mark it? Or almost everything. So I think the push is, she's pushed for. Do you remember if coroutines got in or not? Context per coroutines? I can't remember. She's pushed for. She implemented it. Like not only put the word context per in front of these things. She tried it out. It's just not all the vendors can do that. So, does that answer your question, or?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, by the way, and she works on reflection. We want a lot of these things at compile time. And the other keywords like const-eval and const-init, they are slightly different semantics, and we realized we need different keywords for those things. Conflating them in just didn't work very well.
Designed by committee has a bad reputation.
I agree.
Yeah. So would you think that C++ would look better if there would be some benevolent dictator of life, something like that, like in case of Linus Torvalds for Linux or in other areas?
By the way, recently Linus Torvalds said, C++ is a lovely little language. This surprised me. But yeah, no, it's. So I do not believe.
He still just uses C. So. And Rust. So no C++. He once tried C++ and refused it.
He's had other projects with it, but yeah, it's. We're not really designed by committee. We are consensus by committee. And that's a different thing. We do a little bit of design, it's fuzzy. But a lot of times, like someone does design and we say, well, you need to explore this other thing and explain, you're the expert, you explain why your way is better. Is the benevolent dictatorship a better model? It's a different model. We've certainly had, Java, Python, right? Most of the things that are not standardized languages tend to have the other model. People on the other model want ours, people in our model want that one. So we don't know how to get just the benefits, right? It's just a set of trade-offs. And we get an enormous amount of talent because of the way we do it. That, Herb is right when he says, this costs, millions of dollars in talent to get this stuff done because you couldn't afford to pay them. It's because we're willing to volunteer and we're willing to convince our companies that this is an important thing and we should give our resources towards it. So it's a hard question, right? Certainly the other models they're also valid models, right, for doing development. But what happens when, you don't like what the dictator does, right? The dictator wins. I mean, Carbon is I haven't looked lately. If you read through all their stuff, they're eventually a dictator model because it gets down and they can't come to consensus. A dictator gets to decide. Benevolent dictator. I mean, that's just what it is, right? It's why we don't listen. We sometimes get data from companies. In my company, here's how all this code is written. That's one data point because companies are also dictatorships, right? They're people who can say, here's how you must do something. Right? It's not a bad, this context is not a bad word. It's just saying that someone is running things, right? They make final decisions. And I think having our committee works better for all we've done a lot of really good work. Oh.
As you asked me, const expert coroutines have been approved by Evolution for 29.
Okay.
With a very large majority.
So the history is HANA did implement it, and David wants to redo his coroutine engine, I think. Don't quote me on that. Erase the video. No, no, it's fine. I'm just kidding. So it's not quite getting into 26. We do have to take implementers into account. For instance, ABI is not mentioned anywhere in the standard, application binary interface, and yet it's hugely important to every member of the committee.
Yeah, thank you for this inspiring talk. Also to stand up and ask some questions. As you draw a circle from the start with Beeman and the Boost library, there are sayings that it's harder to get into Boost than getting into the standard. And starting on that.
That's not wrong.
Well, there is this kind of fresh new Beeman project.
There's a Beeman project,
do you
yes.
know about it? And
Yes.
will it fly, actually?
They're trying to. I think it can. It's not just that things are hard to get into Boost. That's one of the problems. Another problem is that you have to maintain it forever. And some people are getting older and are not doing it, and they're not doing very well. How do you deal with that is a really hard management thing, and how do you deal with that when it's an all-volunteer force? Right, so the Beeman project, they're kind of committee adjacent, right? It's certainly David Sankel is one of the big proponents of it, Deep Mercule and a few others. And it's a place to put things you want to propose to the standard, to get the implementations and possibly the papers into shape for giving to the standard. Because on the standards committee, we really like having implementations. And for library, there's almost no excuse for not having an implementation, right? Compiler's harder because you have to learn how to write it, how do you put things into Clang may not be that easy to do. I've only had 3 days ever trying that, so Doug Greger was the one helping me, so I'm no expert by any means on that. So does that answer? These are all great questions.
Okay, you mentioned you do GPU programming. So the question is, does GPU programming takes a lot of attention during within the committee and during the new release of standards?
So that's part of what we're using SYCL for, and I'll explain why. SYCL came from OpenCL initially, and we want a portable layer. We can't for National Labs we can't just go to CUDA because then that would log us into a vendor. So as far as the committee, so SYCL, we see part of our mission is to try different things out and then propose them. For the standards committee, the stuff's changing too fast. Things we put in the standard, we want to last, decades. So we don't know how to do that with GPUs because we don't know where they're going to go, even in the near term. We have done things like MD span, which we know a number of, Everyone wants array kind of notations for things, so we know that'll work. And since we did this, it came from the Cocos project initially, and we got a bunch of others like NVIDIA on board and help with design. And so we know this has broad appeal, and it's unlikely to change, be out of style anytime soon. So we're trying to figure out how to. People would like us to do GPUs. I want to retire long before that because it would take at least a decade, if not longer. And there's things we know we need, like we don't have memory spaces. We desperately need those, but how do you specify it in such a way that you can't lock out vendors because they're just going to vote against you, like strongly against you? And we don't know how to do that for things that are changing rapidly.
Oh, right. Thanks, Nevin. Sorry. It's time to wrap up. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Please give him another hand. And before we stop, we have